Marxism in Minneapolis. That's what we're talking about today. But I want to back up our history for just a little bit and go back just a little bit back into the 1960s to see how all of the table was set for what is happening now in America, and whether it's going on in Minneapolis, Minnesota, or whether it's going on in California or in Mamdani's New York. How the table was set for all of that back at least into the 1960s, and actually we could take it back even further to FDR's period, where we have a socialistic style government that began to take shape from the seeds that were planted, but even earlier than that, by Woodrow Wilson. But let's just back up to the 1960s, and we're talking about the balkanization of America. In 1965, Ted Kennedy fundamentally transformed America. And he did that by lies, lies, and lies, and revamping our immigration system. Beginning in 1965, he led the complete revamping of how we considered immigration in America. Now, formerly, in our immigration system, there were numerical caps, national quotas that were in place that regulated not only how many immigrants could come here, but controlled which ones, favoring European nations over other nations, such as nations on the African continent or South America. But according to Kennedy, the national quotas and ceiling on the number of immigrants violated our principles. So when critics argued the changes that he was proposing, for he wanted to get away with the quotas, get away with capping it from African nations and South American nations and Mexico, he wanted to get away from all of that, and he wanted to open up immigration all across the board. And when critics argued that these changes that he was proposing would alter the mix of the country into voting blocks favoring Democrats, for which is one reason he was doing it, and any sound-minded person could foresee this was exactly what was occurring, he famously stood on the Senate floor and lied. And here's what he said, and this is a direct quote: "The bill would not flood our cities with immigrants. It will not upset the ethnic mix of our society. It will not relax the standards of admission. It will not cause American workers to lose their jobs." End of quote. Now, you might just look at that statement and think about every one of those clauses absolutely was a bald-faced lie on its very surface. He said that it would not flood our cities with immigrants. That's exactly what happened. It will not upset the ethnic mix of our society. That is exactly what has happened. The ethnic mix of our society has absolutely been upside down from the time of the 1960s. That is to say simply that a majority Caucasian culture has turned into a majority minority culture. And so we have in Texas, for example, the majority culture is Hispanic. That's what we have in Texas. He also said that it will not relax the standards of admission. That's exactly what did occur. The standards of admission absolutely were relaxed and actually done away with. It will not cause American workers to lose their jobs. That's exactly what did happen, because you cannot have a society in which you have mandated a minimum wage to workers in an American society, and at the same time flood our country with illegals who will take the same jobs at a lower price or lower wage than the American workers were expecting. So what you know what's going to happen, and that is the people who are hiring, the employers, whether it be farmers or whatever, would automatically drift toward hiring people coming from Mexico or other countries in Latin America, because they don't have to pay them as much. So the Democrats led the way. Minimum wage, at the same time allowing immigration to come from minority countries in which they're going to take American jobs at a lesser wage than American workers. That's exactly what did happen. So the point is, why did this happen? And I'm going to say it's because Ted Kennedy and his ilk hate America. They hated America as it was. They did not like America. They wanted a socialistic society, and in order to have a socialistic society, this is what had to be done. You had to open the borders and immigration with federal wage federal wage controls, and then mass immigration. In other words, you cannot have a country where you have minimum wage laws for American workers, at the same time flood the country with people who are willing to take the same jobs at lesser costs. It just will not work, and it absolutely will bring more immigration into our country. So, not only so, but we have sanctuary cities. Sanctuary cities in our country, which are in violation of our law, to protect illegal aliens, is all Democrat-led. I think that people surely can see the picture that is drawn here, and that is the Democrats led in the minimum wage practices. They led the way in breaking down the immigration system that we have and allowing people to come in here from all over the world. And then we have sanctuary cities to protect those people who are here illegally. All Democrat-led. What is this going to do? It's going to upside down or tear our country apart inside out. Let's turn our attention to socialism, Marxism for just a moment. Socialism is, of course, the redistribution of monies. It is a giant carrot for anyone to come here. The redistribution of money, all of which our founding fathers made illegal and unconstitutional. You cannot take money from one individual and give it to another. It was absolutely unconstitutional, unlawful, and as they recognized to be the case, it is unbiblical, it is ungodly to steal the federal government or a state government from one person and give it to another person. Now, we have accepted this today in our society. Even on Fox News, you hear many commentators of a conservative brand saying, well, you know what, we want to take care of the poor and we want to be able to do this. They've accepted the idea that the government is to take money from the rich or take money from whomever and give it to the poor. That is unconstitutional as set up by our founding fathers, and it is ungodly because it is stealing. If I want to help someone, then that's my prerogative. Socialism, therefore, is the forcible redistribution of money. That became a giant carrot for people to come here. So now you have Marxist organizations operating openly with Democratic support. Just for example, Black Lives Matter. Back in 2020, Black Lives Matter came to the forefront. What was it? It was a Marxist organization. And they even had on the front page of the website the demolition or the destruction of the American family. They wanted to get rid of mom, dad, and the kids, the biblical model. They said that from the very beginning. And all the leaders, such as the Opal Tomidis of the world, they were Marxist-trained leaders. All of them were Marxists. And so the Democrats piled on board. Why did they get on board with that? Because the Democrat Party basically is a Marxist party in America. And their business is to rile up and engender strife from the street minions to get them to do their bidding. And that's exactly what's going on right now when we go to Minneapolis. They take the low IQ voters, the people they flooded in here from many countries, many of them illegally, some of them legally, but they flooded in here from countries who have no concept of our constitutional frame of government and constitutional workings of our government, and think that the redistribution of money is something that ought to be done. Now they have the sanctuary cities in place, which is a violation of federal law, and that is all sponsored by Democrats. They're lawless. Then they rile up the street minions to go be violent and to assault ICE and to assault people, and that's what's going on in Minneapolis. That takes us to Minneapolis. Minneapolis is a sanctuary city. The leaders there have flouted our laws. They thumb their nose at our laws. So they're demanding that law enforcement not enforce immigration law. And what is the hue and cry right now as I do this podcast in America across the Democratic board, and that is to get rid of ICE, immigrations and customs enforcement. They don't want immigration enforcement. They love what Joe Biden did. If Democrats get back in power, that's exactly what they will do: open up the borders. The Democrats want open borders. And if you don't have immigration enforcement, you might as well have open borders, because no one's going to enforce the law, period. A law, if it's not enforced, is just a non-entity. And so it might be on the books, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all, because the Democrats do not want to enforce the law. And so all they do is rile up, stir up the people on the bottom, the street people. And unfortunately, there's some people in Congress, such as Ilhan Omar, Jasmine Crockett, Eric Stilwell, all those individuals, they're just bottom feeders themselves. And they're just stirring up the people on the bottom. So what's happened in Minneapolis? I say this: Marxism in Minneapolis. ICE had Operation Metro Surge. They arrest suspects of child abuse, drug trafficking, domestic violence, credit card fraud. But the Marxists don't like it. So there are Marxist organizations that are absolutely stirring up, along with the Democratic leaders in Congress, stirring up the people on the bottom. So you have these three organizations that have already been uncovered, and there are probably more also coming as well. Number one, Answer Coalition. You ought to look up Answer Coalition. The leader is Brian Becker. They took part in a New York City protest. They appeared on Chinese state media outlet. This is the Chinese Communist Party supporting Answer Coalition. And Answer Coalition has called for protests after the shooting of Rene Good. So Answer Coalition, Brian Becker, is stirring up the Marxists on the streets of Minneapolis. A second one after Answer Coalition is this one: the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Now, the Party for Socialism and Liberation is tied to a pro-Beijing millionaire called Neville Roy Singham. He lives in Shanghai. He's an anti-American, pro-communist, pro-Marxist, self-proclaimed Marxist and Leninist. His goal? To sow discord in the United States. Are we seeing discord? Yes, we are. Where does it come from? People like Neville Roy Singham. Same thing as the others that we've seen before, such as the George Soroses of the world. Their goal is to stir up violent protest or stir up dissatisfaction at the street level and to stir up discord in the United States. The congressional investigations, which in this case is led by Representative Anna Paulina Luna, a Republican in Florida, has uncovered the Party for Socialism and Liberation. You ought to listen to what she has to say. This is exactly what Neville Roy Singham is all about. He's a communist who is stirring up the street thugs in Minneapolis. Then you have the People's Forum. So you not only have what we've called the Answer Coalition, or what is called the Answer Coalition by Brian Becker, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, tied to Neville Roy Singham, but also you have the People's Forum. Now here's just a sidebar. Anytime you have the People's Forum or the People's Network or the People's Party, you know it's a socialistic party. The founder is Manolo de los Santos, the executive director. Singham sent money to Los Santos's The People's Forum. Singham is a former Black Panther lifelong socialist. All of these people, in January 6th, the ex-post was this: our movement is fighting on all fronts for a free Palestine, for working people, free classes, and free culture to, now get this, to get ICE off the streets, and for socialism. This is the People's Forum. All of these parties, all of these organizations, Marxist to the core, are behind what's happening in Minneapolis. But sadly, the Democratic leaders that we have in America, and we're just going to notice a short list here, fall in line. They don't support the law. They don't support the Constitution. They're lawless. They are Marxists in their orientation. So you have Chris Van Hollen, a Democrat of Maryland. He says illegals can move into their state, but not ICE. We're not the Immigration Customs Enforcement. This is in spite of The Constitution that he has sworn to uphold, Article 6, Section 3 says the supreme law of the land is the federal law, the Constitution. But he doesn't care. Jasmine Crockett, a low IQ congresswoman from our own state of Texas, she demands that ICE, she says it reminds her of the slave patrols in the Old South. So she's making it racial. Eric Swalwell, Democrat of California, I think I miscalled his name. I called it Swalwell, Democrat in California, says he wants to get rid of ICE. Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis, all of them, and more also, the Democrats, all they want to do is get rid of the enforcement of the law. And when you get rid of the enforcement of the law, you might as well not have the law at all. This is why they hate Trump. So I challenge people who are voting Democrat to get out of the Democratic Party. It's a lawless, Marxist-oriented party. But then you have the street minions, the people who are absolutely low IQ functioning, I suppose. I don't know if they're low IQ, but they're low information voters. And that is to say, they're attacking conservatives on the street. Protesters are targeting hotels where ICE agents stay. They have anti-ICE groups. You know, let's see this one. Sunrise Twin Cities. Sunrise Twin Cities has a website, has all kinds of things posted on X. They celebrated that Greg Bovino, the leader of ICE in Minneapolis, they said getting fired recently, replaced by President Trump, and Bovino was put back on the border. They put up noise demonstrations outside of hotels, unlawful assemblies declared unlawful by their own law enforcement in Minneapolis, but they don't care. They've done $6,000 worth of damage at the Renaissance Minneapolis Hotel. Then you have nurses getting online here. They don't know what's happening. They just absolutely just jumping on board the tail end of all this, and nurses are saying, "Well, I want to poison anybody who's an ICE agent." Or I've seen some persons on X saying, "You know what? All the Trump supporters, when they get to be the nursing home, they don't know what's coming to them. We're going to get them then." You know what? It would be good if Democrats would get educated on what's going on. That's what's happening. So we have Marxism in Minneapolis, Marxism also in New York City and other places. But Minneapolis is taking the lead in Marxism at this particular time.